Hi guys, welcome back to the channel here to our study of The Purpose Driven Life by Rick Warren. We are on day 14, so let's just dive right in, shall we? Alrighty, so day 14, the title for today is When God Seems Distant. Alright, we all have those moments where we feel like God is far away or God isn't involved in our life. And so that's what we're going to be talking about today, because we have been talking about worshiping God. We are, I guess, exploring what it means to worship God in this type of scenario. Okay, so think about this. So we all know that the sun shines even though there's clouds, right? The sun exists behind those clouds, though we cannot see it. Right there, we don't see the ball of fire in the sky. We know the sun does not cease to exist even on the darkest or cloudiest of days, right? Okay, so in the same way, the same principle could be applied to God. God is real, even when I can't feel him or see him in my situation. God does not cease to exist because I cease to sense him or I cease to believe, right? God is God. He's not, what is it, like fairies where you have to believe in them for them to be real, right? It's God is God and he stands alone, okay? So many people, though, that's what they base their life off. They don't believe in God because they can't see him. And the crazy thing that even self-proclaimed believers have a hard time believing in God when they don't feel him, or when things are going badly. They ask, well, where's God? Does God even exist? How does God even make sense in this situation? Because XYZ, God must not be real. And that's ridiculous. So we're going to explore that thought a little bit. And also the question we're going to really kind of focus on is, okay, so let's say I believe in God. Let's say I understand that I was created for the purpose of worshiping him. I was created for the purpose of glorifying him. How do I do that when God feels a million miles away? All right. So Rick Warren says this: the deepest level of worship is praising God in spite of pain, thanking God during a trial, trusting him when tempted, surrendering while suffering, and loving when he seems distant. And then we have Philip Yancey. He wisely noted that any relationship, right, earthly relationship and also our relationship with God, any relationship involves times of closeness and times of distance. And in a relationship with God, no matter how intimate, the pendulum will swing from one side to another. And it's when the pendulum is swung all the way farthest from you, that's when it feels like it's harder to reach God. The thing is, at those moments, what's happening is God will test our heart with these moments of seeming separation. And I say seeming because God is always close. He promises that in his word over and over. There's various verses where you can literally type in, I will never leave you nor forsake you, and like various verses comes up where God has made that promise to his people. I will not leave you. I will not abandon you, right? And so so we can stand on that promise, okay, knowing, okay, he promised, and this is the truth. Matthew 28:20 says, I will be with you until the end of the age. So this is what I mean by seeming separation. God pulls back. And when he does this, we go through what a poet once described as the dark night of the soul. Like, how poetic, right? But it's it's poetic, but it's not as pretty as it sounds. It's a place where you begin to question. It's a place where you begin to doubt. And a lot of people think, oh, doubt is the opposite of faith. I must not have enough faith. Now, it's true, at all times, our faith is always needing to grow. But doubt is not necessarily opposite to faith. I think opposite to faith is when you disengage, when there's this nonchalant, I'm okay with the status quo, just let it ride out kind of attitude, right? That, and I'll explain why that's contrary to faith. But here in this test, right, in this intense testing, it is meant to make our faith grow, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So in these darkness, in these moments of just night and doubting and questioning, you might say, well, that's messed up. Like, why would God do that to us? He promises to be there, and then he goes, I'm not here. And he does, the Bible does support this, that God has said, I hide myself, from you so that you can't see me for a time. It's a thing. It's a real thing. So then it's not just us. You end up feeling like, I did something wrong. What did I do? Did I sin? Did God pull back from me because I messed up somehow? Or am I not trying hard enough? Or, God isn't listening to me. You end up feeling like something is wrong with you. And in that moment, many people have left their faith behind, right? They give up. They say, God's not real. I don't believe in him anymore. I don't know that I ever did. And they start questioning. They start filling in blanks. And like, well, there's this one moment. I really must not believe in God. Recently, I heard a report of a lead in a band. He was like, God's like a warm sweater, and the more questioning that would come into my mind, the more it was like pulling on that sweater, and they came to a point where the sweater was gone, and he makes this very arrogant statement at the end that kind of just says, and I'm okay with that, I live in this sunny atmosphere. I'm okay admitting that I don't believe in God anymore. I'm good, and the fact is, like I mentioned in the beginning, just because you don't believe in him, God does not cease to exist. And these moments where he pulls that back, where God pulls back from we don't feel his manifested presence, right, necessarily in our lives in that moment. We don't see him working with our eyes, with the situation, the circumstances around us. It's those moments that test us and bring us to a new place of faith if we fight through it. When we just kind of decide to, I'm just kind of gonna give in to these moments, God's not for me kind of thing, you lose out on something that could have been really great. And again, this might not make sense right now, but hopefully by the end of this, it makes a little bit more sense, and I kind of flesh it out a little bit more, right? And the silly thing about giving up on God in those dark moments, right, giving up on our faith, is that we're not the first, and we're not the only ones going through that, or who have gone through that. There has been so many people, smarter people, intelligent people, more capable people, more amazing people than I or you or anyone who has gone through this moment, and not only gone through it, but literally like succeeded and thrived and come out stronger and more able, right? There's King David, Job, Joseph, like they've all have moments where they feel abandoned, and yet God hasn't left them. Yes, there was a moment of pulling back, but they stuck through it, and at the end they became stronger because of it. So here's the rub though. Here's what we have to learn about these moments. The true essence of these tests, right, of this test that you're going through, whatever, is that we learn, right? It is what ends up happening. We learn that God's power and God's very existence does not reside, right? Does not rest on how we feel or how we perceive things or how we perceive God to be. God is God, all on his own, and he's on our side when we have faith in him, when we keep our faith in him. In Narnia, right, the Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis, there's this one section where the kids, and if you don't know the story, Aslan is the god figure. It's a story, a set of 7 books, and Aslan is the representative in that whole story of God, right? The person of God. And so there's these kids who enter this magical land of Narnia. And so they're nervous about meeting this lion for the first time, and they're in Mrs. Beaver's house. And so, Mr. and Mrs. Beaver's house. And so they're asking the beaver, they're talking animals. And so they're asking the beaver, is Aslan safe? Like, we're quite nervous about meeting a lion. We've never met a lion before. And so Mr. Beaver replies, who said anything about safe? Of course he isn't safe, but he's good. He's the king, I tell you. That's the reply that Mr. Beaver replies, because, and again, it's relating to our relationship with God. We want to create our own image of God. So we imagine God as we want him. This is what we are. This is who we are as human beings. We don't know something, and so we start creating scenarios in our head, right? So we start imagining God a certain way, and so we love him when he behaves that way, because this is what God should behave like. We start building a little box of attributes that we think should be God, and we put God in that box, and so we create a God of our own image. And so we hold this God close when he makes things work out for us, when he makes things the way we think they should go. That's when God is God. The fact is, God is God all on his own. He stands alone, and so he does not reside within the safe parameters, the safe ideas that we have created for God. He is good, just like Mr. Beaver says, but he is the king. And in those moments when God pulls back, we are able to destroy the false ideas that we have created. This safe, warm, yummy God that we want. And he becomes truly God, whether there's ferociousness in him, or whether there's, strength. That goodness is there, but there's a whole nother aspect of God that God wants us to see. And if he lets us stay within that box parameter of what we created to God to be, we will never truly know God, right? As he is. So the question is, in those moments where he pulls back, will we continue to love, to trust, to obey, to worship God, right? Even when there's no sense of his presence or visible evidence of his work in our life. And if we hold on, our faith will grow, right? Because God never takes away something from you and gives you something crummier, right? He takes away in order to fill it with something much more brilliant and fantastic and awesome and beyond what our imagination can see. And so it's when he pulls back and we're in that darkness, and that there's this cultivation that happens, that true faith and true knowledge can grow. And I'll explain a little bit more as we go along how that kind of works, all right? So let me present a very loose analogy and how this kind of plays out. Think about like when a husband and a wife are traveling apart, right? One's in, the US and the other one's in Europe or something. There's this phrase that says distance makes the heart grow fonder, right? And again, this is a very loose analogy. When they're apart, they miss each other. They think about each other. Even when they run into situations that we might call temptations, and they're faithful to one another, that trust and that relationship between them two becomes stronger, right? They don't take each other for granted. They see how important they are to each other. And so with God, it's similar. Again, remember, loose analogy. It's similar in that when he pulls back, we're able to kind of take a step back and kind of assess our relationship with him, assess the basis for our relationship with him. And so we don't take God for granted. When in those beautiful moments where we feel his presence, they're amazing moments, but realize that isn't God, right? Warm, fuzzy feelings is not God. it's more than that. And so with these dark moments, God pulls back, and not only are we building relationship, building this conscious appreciation for God, but we're building our faith. Let me present another analogy that kind of draws a little bit more on that faith factor. So when food is brought to you, right? It's constantly brought to your table, and you just sit there and feed me, right? There's no need to hunt. There's no need to go after your food. But when food is scarce, when it's not being, carried to you on a silver platter, you have to learn, and here I'm going back to the raw basics, right? But for sake of the analogy, you have to learn how to hunt, or you have to learn how to plant. And through that process, you have to learn how to be patient. You learn what it takes, what work goes into putting food on the table so that you're able to eat. You do the hard work and you appreciate the food more. In a similar experience, in my personal experience, it's those dark nights of the soul, right? Where God's presence isn't laid out for me on a silver platter, right? That in those moments, it's when I learn more. It's when I learn exponentially. It's where I really search and really reach out for God. And I really appreciate the vast knowledge and the resources that God has placed out there to strengthen and grow my faith. But when I'm just sitting there getting fed by pastor, getting fed by any, lead or minister, when it's all just kind of passive and it's like, feed me, feed me, feed me, I'm sitting there and I'm getting spiritually fat and spiritually stagnant. And so you can either live like that, right? Just constantly being fed, and you keep the status quo, which is boring. And our Christian life was never meant to be boring. Our life period was never meant to be boring. Or you slide into this neutral, which is highly dangerous, because what happens there is the devil takes advantage. And he's like, well, if you're not driving, I'll take up the mantle. Don't mind if I do, right? It's dangerous in that position. And so the alternative here is get up, get to it, learn how to do it, get working, exercise. And just like exercise and the real life, it keeps you alive, and good exercise makes you stronger. In the same sense, when God pulls back and your spiritual faith muscles are exercised, you not only, keep alive spiritually speaking, but your faith and your spiritual muscles, they grow, right? So there's that. At the end of the day, faith pleases God and not feelings. Hebrews 11:6 says, without faith it is impossible to please God. God looks at depth of heart and not superficial motives, right? Just like any relationship, you say, I've been told, well, I love hanging out with you because you make me feel good. You know what's in the back of my mind? And this is me. This could just be me. But you're thinking, well, what about the days where I don't make you feel good? What about the days where I don't make you laugh? It makes me feel a little insecure, because is that all our relationship is, right? When I make you feel good? And in the same sense, God, are you only going to serve me? Are you only going to worship me when I got things going for you, when I'm your magic genie and things are good? And this is why he pulls back, so that he can see, okay, what's in their heart, what's their faith based on? What is our relationship with each other based on? Is it just the gimme, 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 I'm good if you just keep me here, or is it more than that? All right. So the questions are, well, how do you praise God when you don't understand what's happening in your life and God is silent? Or how do you stay connected in a crisis without communication? Because communication is key in any relationship, right? How do you keep your eyes on Jesus when they're full of tears, right? So you do what Job did. Job 1:21 says, then he fell to the ground in worship and said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked I will depart. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. May the name of the Lord be praised, right? So basically there was this trust that went beyond his situation and his circumstance. There was a surrender, almost, even like, hey, my life is his, and well, he can do with it what he wants, right? We're going to talk about briefly 4 ways of how to worship God in the dark, right? How does this look? Sorry, the fan keeps blowing my hair. Okay, so I'm going to go over it briefly. If this is a topic that interests you, I'm going to put a link, hopefully it works, a link of the book's PDF in the description, so that if all works well, you can click on it, go to the book, read this chapter, and really kind of read all Rick Warren kind of has to say on this. Hold on. I learned from my past mistakes. All right, here we go. So, number 1, tell God exactly how you feel. Pour out your heart to God. Unload every emotion, every thought that you're feeling. Job did this when he said, I can't be quiet. I am angry and bitter. I have to speak. God can handle your doubt and your anger and your fear and your grief and your confusion and your questions, right? David wrote, I believed in you, so I said, I am deeply troubled, Lord. This sounds like a contradiction, doesn't it? He's saying, I trust God, but I'm wiped out, right? But David's frankness actually reveals a deeper faith in God. It's kind of like this. For me personally, there are certain people I will not go to when I'm troubled, when I'm having a tough moment, confusing feelings, because there lacks this sense of trust with that person, right? I don't know that person won't just judge me right off the bat. I don't know if that person even wants to handle what I'm throwing at them, right? I might even be a little afraid to share this because I don't know, like there's this barrier that keeps me from them, and that shows a lack of closeness, doesn't it? On the opposite end, when I trust someone enough, or when I have that type of relationship with them, I, in a sense, honor them by going to them and going, this is what I'm going through. This is what I'm feeling. And I know they're not like, oh, you're so drama or you're so extra. I know that they're going to help me through it, and they're going to help me make sense of it. Because sometimes you just need somebody to help you make sense of it, right? And so when you come to God and you go, I am a mess, God, I am confused. It's not that you're showing a lack of trust. On the opposite end, you're showing trust in the relationship that you have with God. Does that make sense? So here, that's what David does constantly in the Psalms, right? He's like, oh, I'm this and I'm that, but God, I trust you still. It's crazy. I don't know what to do, but I know you're in control, right? There's this dichotomy. There's this opposing kind of thing. And that's how our minds are sometimes. You're on one end of the spectrum, and then you're on the other end of the spectrum, or you're both ends of the spectrum at the same time. So God can handle what you feel. Tell him, all right? So 2, focus on who God is, his unchanging nature. Now remind yourself what you know to be eternally true about God, right? He is good, and he loves us, and he is with us, and he knows what I'm going through, and he actually cares, right? And he has a plan for my life. Sometimes we forget about those things, right? Find verses that talk about those things. Pin them on your wall, screenshot them on your phone so you can have easy access to them. Write them on your mirror. Whatever you got to do to remind yourself. This mug, it says whatever. I love it. On the other side, it's actually a verse, and it's Philippians 4:8. It talks about whatever's true, noble, right, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, praiseworthy. Think about such things. It's silly sometimes, like, all right, I need this to remind me, but we're visual. And sometimes when there's a mess in here, it works to have things spelled out. This is why the written word is such a strong, I just spilled water on myself. This is why the written word is such a strong resource for us. And God knew exactly what he was doing when he had the authors pen out his words, because he knew that we would need to see that. He knew that we would need to remind ourselves. And so remind yourselves of the unchanging nature of God. Raymond Edmonds says, never doubt in the dark what God told you in the light. Good, right? All right, that was 2. This is 3. 3, trust God to keep his promises. We already talked about how he promised to never leave us nor forsake us. Trust him. That's exactly what he's going to do. Job 23 says, I have not departed from the commands of his lips, talking about God. I have treasured the words of his mouth more than my daily bread. God, what God says is more valuable than even what I eat every day and keeps me alive. That's what Job is saying. That's the depth of how much he trusts what God says. You rely on his promises and not on your feelings, because our feelings, if you have them, which you do, you know that they go up and down and up and down, right? They're unsteady. Another section in Job says, God may kill me, but I will still trust him. Isn't that crazy? Like, he can take my life, but I'm like, in my heart, I'm still going to trust him. Why? Because your life is his. And Job had that trust in God. My life is yours. My soul is yours. My spirit, everything is yours. So even if physically I die, I'm still going to trust you. And isn't that what Jesus did? Whew. All right, number 4, remember what God has already done for you. Rick Warren says, if God never did anything else for you, he would still deserve your continual praise for the rest of your life because of what Jesus did for you on the cross. God's Son died for you. This is the greatest reason for your worship. 2 Corinthians 5:21 says, Christ was without sin, but for our sake God made him share in our sin in order that in union with him we might share the righteousness of God. That alone deserves praise and gratitude, right? The fact that if I don't see any other miracle in my life ever again, the one miracle of saving me, wretched as I am, broken, morally bankrupt as I am, he said, I want you. That deserves praise. And the thing is, God is not the kind of God who just, well, I saved you, so deal with it and you're fine. He continually shows up in our lives if we let him, right? That's what faith is. So the point to ponder here is God is real, no matter how I feel, right? So no matter how you wake up or how you go to sleep and what you're feeling in those moments, because normally, guys, morning time and, well, like top of the morning and like bottom of the night, that's when our feelings, if we're having a low time, that's when our feelings just kind of peak down. And so be careful about those moments. Regardless of how we feel, though, God is still God, and he's still in control. He still loves us, and all the other good stuff and amazing stuff that the Bible tells us is true about God in relation to us. The verse to kind of remember throughout is, for God has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. I will not abandon you, right? That's Hebrews 13:5. Remember it. Guys, it is crucial. Get verses all over the place if you need them. It's to constantly remind yourself, right? And you can memorize them, and that's good, but sometimes we need an extra reminder, right? So then go throughout your life, right? Go throughout this week, go throughout, just kind of live your life in a way where you're constantly asking yourself, okay, how can I stay focused on God's presence, especially when he feels distant? And that's something that you're going to have to figure out for yourself. All right, that's what I got for you guys. I hope it was a blessing. Again, if you have any questions on this topic, feel free to contact and we can hash things out. All right, God bless you guys. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.